New York, chief political correspondent, the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor, and Katie Pavlich, editor at townhall.com and also a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you. I mean, Katie, one point here is Kamala Harris is in trouble with Catholic voters in general. We've talked about this. And crazy things like Gretchen Whitmer with this Dorito for communion, which was a direct affront to the Catholic Church. There are other issues chasing after the Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, there's a whole variety of things. We had Jim Nicholson on, who was a former ambassador to the Vatican. We've had Newt Gingrich on, whose wife, Calista, was a former ambassador. She got trouble with Catholic. I mean, they may think it's a better use of her time to be someplace else, but I'm not so sure about that. And I think this video is going to raise the profile of her not being there. What do you think?
Yeah. Exactly. Absent from the room is what that video will highlight. Just show up if you're going to be there rather than sending it in, phoning it in, really. This says a few things. It says that she does need to be in other places that are competitive, like Pennsylvania and other swing states, because she has not even locked down the coalitions that she needs to beat Donald Trump in those states. The other thing is that she just doesn't really like Catholics that much. If you look at her record as a U.S. Senator, as the Attorney General of California, she went after pro-life groups. She went after Catholic charities. As a senator, she was vicious towards Catholic judicial nominees that came in front of her when she was on the Senate Judiciary Committee. She has a long record of persecuting Catholic charities and Catholics. You mentioned the Little Sisters of the Poor. She's supported legislation that would force them to engage in providing things like contraception, and she wanted to force pro-life groups and crisis pregnancy centers to post abortion services on their websites. And then finally, I just don't think that she can really take a joke. They don't want any more humiliating clips going around the internet of Kamala Harris, especially after last night. And this would be something that she couldn't quite handle in terms of the jokes that may be told about her.
Boy, yeah, she lost her cool with Bret Baier. I mean, among other things, you can argue yes or no substantively, whatever that means, but she lost her cool with Bret Baier. Byron, New York, you're writing, I mean, weigh in on this if you want to add to what Katie talked about, but you're also writing, there's been a big campaign shift in the final weeks. You kind of see it in the polls, but it's almost something you sense. And I wanted to hear you talk about that. I haven't seen you in a week or two. What is this campaign shift as you read it, Byron?
Well, first of all, on the Al Smith dinner, 25% of the electorate in 2020 was Catholic. And Joe Biden, who is himself Catholic, won it by 52 to 47%. Now we have the best polling I've just seen from Pew has Donald Trump ahead, 52 to 47% over Kamala Harris. It's not a good idea to alienate anybody, especially in a really large group that you need. As far as the momentum in the election, I think we have seen, in the past 10 days now, a shift in the polls toward Trump, especially in the national polls. And what that suggests is that there's almost kind of a resting normal for this race. And that's with Donald Trump with a really small but clear lead. If you remember, after Joe Biden drops out, there's this huge boost, this bump, this sugar high for Kamala Harris. About when it's beginning to wear off comes the convention. She gets another week of celebration, and there's another bump for her. It keeps her up a little bit. And then when that's about to wear off comes the debate. Donald Trump has a really bad debate. She's not that great, but it's a lot better than Trump. She has a benefit from that. But now we've gotten to a period where that has worn off, and there's nothing really on the horizon. There's always unpredictable events, but there's nothing on the horizon like a convention or a debate to change that.
Well, Katie Pavlich, I want to try to combine these two things because, talking about her weakness with Catholic voters and talking about the momentum shift that Byron is referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, but these industrial states are top-heavy Catholic states, aren't they? I mean, historically they are. Pennsylvania, Michigan.
They are.
I mean, I mean, this is worse. This couldn't be. These are the worst states. If you go down south, the concentration of Catholic vote, I think, is far less than it is in the older northern blue-collar type states. So, in some sense, this is going to add her troubles with Catholic voters play in to the shifted momentum that Byron's talking about, which probably covers other things. And Katie, I don't think she did herself any good with Bret Baier last night. You tell me.
No. The finger wagging towards the end of the very short interview, which they, didn't hold up their end of the deal on, did not come off well. But to Byron's point, the Al Smith dinner could have been this big event for her. It could have been one that maybe gave her some more exposure in a way that she can reintroduce herself yet again to the American people, to the Catholic voters that, as you say, take up a lot of the voting population in these states that she needs to win. But in politics, and if you're working on a campaign, you always have to look at, is the risk greater than the reward? And clearly they think her going to this dinner in person is not worth the reward. Now, clearly they think that they also think they're going to get something out of this by doing a video, but it just seems like it's a poor effort to kind of change your mind when you're starting to realize that maybe you should have showed up and not broken tradition that dates back to 1984.
They could have hired some clever Hollywood writers to gin something up for her right there in person. Free. I mean, that's, this is not hard, for heaven's sakes. What Hillary did it years ago. I mean, it's not hard. All right. Byron, you're writing about Bill Clinton's gaffe, admitting about the tragic murders, not just Riley, but also some of the others. I want to play Bill Clinton's sound and then have you two comment on this.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Now, Byron, bringing up Laken Riley like that, which, of course, harkens back to some of the other tragic deaths of these young women, to me, kind of blows out or just blows up or deflates the Kamala Harris arguments about immigration and what the Democrats did or did not do 3.5 years ago and what they want to do now and what they're doing another term. I mean, there it is. She wouldn't address that when Bret Baier asked her about it, but what do you think?
No, absolutely blew it up. This was from Clinton, this was a classic Washington gaffe. The definition of a Washington gaffe being when a politician tells the truth. Something that's obviously true, but you're just not supposed to say it. And so, of all people, Bill Clinton comes out and tells the truth. This is something that everybody knows, that letting in millions of people who cross the border illegally, allowing them to stay without vetting, can have disastrous results. And that's what we've seen in the cases of some of these crimes. But as you know, and you saw it again with the Bret Baier interview, Kamala Harris insists that there were a couple of bills that had been introduced that, had they been passed, would have solved this whole problem. And it's the Republicans' fault, and in the second bill, Donald Trump's fault specifically, that they didn't pass these bills, and therefore the problem was not solved. And what Bill Clinton did basically was say, look, in these 3.5 years that we've had, if they had properly vetted the people who were crossing the border, Laken Riley and others would still be alive.
I mean, there's no question. Katie, last 20 seconds. By the way, those bills at the beginning of the administration, those bills would have increased citizenship. They would have increased illegals.
Yes.
There was, I mean, I'll just give you 20 seconds. Everybody knows this. Go on ahead and finish this off.
It's such a false premise to say that the legislation they introduced would somehow fix the border. What they did was take back all of the executive orders that President Trump put in place to stop people from crossing the border. Millions came in. They betrayed the American people by allowing millions of people unvetted into the country. We don't know who they are. They're committing crimes. And now their friends in the media are trying to cover up those crimes and downplaying and saying, well, it's only just a few apartment complexes in places like Colorado that are being taken over by foreign, dangerous gangs. Only a few hotels in New York City. Some people are paying the price for it. Oh, well, that's the cost of mass amnesty and a permanent power for Democrats in this country. That's where they are in this.
All right. Thanks ever so much.